listening to Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Are you seeking more energy and ready to have more healings and revealings in your life? Then you've tuned into the right program. For the next hour, listen in as Reverend Temple Hayes, spiritual leader of First Unity at Unity Campus in St. Petersburg, Florida, shares with you tools you can use to transform your life. She will guide you on a journey to create a life that is intentional and dynamic. Now, here's your host, Reverend Temple Hayes.
And welcome, everyone, and thank you first and foremost for being an intentional spirit. And I just want to give a shout out to my new friend in Sweden. We really love getting those emails and those notes that you're enjoying the show, while at the same time making those recommendations for different authors and guests and holistic practitioners, individuals that really align with what we are about. And we just love it that so many of you spread the message of Unity Online Radio. One of those authors that is always recommended to us, he's back with us for a second time, is Richard Barrett. Richard, welcome to our show today. It's so good to have you again.
Well, thank you, Temple. I'm really happy to be with you.
Well, the way that you just keep putting out those books, I guess we just need to schedule you every year so we could talk about the next one that you have.
Yeah, it's been 6 books in 6 years. I'm gotta keep maintain that.
That's right, exactly. So, because some of the audience listeners are new, and we've added a lot of listeners in other countries that weren't on our show before, would you please take a moment or two or whatever, and just talk about your path a bit, how you got from point A to point B, from awesome to even better.
Ooh, yeah, okay. So, for the first 20 years of my career, so I was brought up in England. Let's go back to the beginning. My mom and dad were very caring and loving. We didn't have a lot of money, and my father's wish was that I go to university. He died when I was 17, and my mom said, you could go out to work and so that we can survive, if you can pay your way through university, I'll try and look after myself. That was a wonderful gift my mother gave me, because I managed to get a grant, and so I got a solid education, became an engineer, and I had a very good career up to about my mid-40s, and when I suddenly realized that I was totally bored with my career in transportation, and realized that since my 20s, what I'd been really interested in was transformation. And so I said to myself, maybe, I misheard my soul when I was 17, when I was trying to figure out what to study at university. I thought my soul said transportation, but actually it said transformation. Anyhow, so I had to get back on track, and so I decided to write a book on personal transformation, a guide to liberating your soul, and that was the beginning then of my whole journey. And I was working at the World Bank in those days. I left the World Bank a few years later, published a guide to liberating your soul, then published Liberating the Corporate Soul, invented a way of measuring consciousness by mapping values for organizations, individuals, and nations, and grew that company to a worldwide company. After about 10 years, I decided to hand running the company over to my team so I could focus on my writing, and that's been really the last 7 or 8 or 9 years of my life, and I've been producing a book every year. Some of the titles are A New Leadership Paradigm, What My Soul Told Me, A Practical Guide to Soul Activation, Love, Fear, and the Destiny of Nations, The Values-Driven Organization, and my latest book, which we're talking about today, I hope, A New Psychology of Human Wellbeing. So here I am. living the life of my soul. And it's taken me quite a few years to get to that point, but I've been through 7 stages of psychological development, which we might be talking about later. And I'm loving my life and enjoying every minute of getting instructions from my soul about what to write. And once I've got instructions, actually having prompts, intuition, synchronicities that guide my writing. There, in a nutshell, is where I am right now.
I just love it. I love it. And just another window of spin on that is that at one time in your life you did external transportation, and now you do internal transportation.
Transformation.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
But you
external
support
transportation to internal transformation. That's correct.
Yeah, to the guiding walk of the soul, So we were very excited to talk about your book today, A New Psychology of Human Well-Being. Get us in that direction. Let's go.
Well, the subtitle is an exploration of the influence of ego-soul dynamics on mental and physical health. And so there we get right into the meat of the book. I wrote the book for several reasons. First of all, I was inspired by Abraham Maslow when he wrote his last book, where he, toward a psychology of being, he said, there's a larger jurisdiction for psychology, and he was very excited by that in the book. And I took that idea as my central inspiration. And then I decided that I would need to write this book for several reasons. One, to get the soul back into psychology. Now, the soul used to be in psychology around the time of Carl Jung. I'm going back 70 or 80 years. Around that time, shortly thereafter, was Roberto Assagioli with his psychosynthesis. And Maslow was he didn't use the word soul, but he used the word inner core. And these were people, leading thinkers of that time. But since that time, I'm going back, as I say, 60, 70 years, the soul has completely gone out of psychology. It's a cognitive science now. And I wanted to bring the soul fully back square into psychology. Because in the book, what I talk about is that, we say that we have an inner core. We say that we have a higher self. We say that we have a soul. But actually, we are the inner core. We are the higher self. We are the soul. And we have to recognize that's our fundamental reality. So you can't have a psychology, I believe, unless you have that reality at its core. The second reason I wrote the book was to get the idea that there are stages of psychological development. It's really the journey of the soul, 7 stages, and all of my work over the past 20 years has been built around this model of 7 levels of consciousness, 7 stages of psychological development. And these stages are actually fundamental to understanding who we are and what's important to us. If you can tell me your age, I can tell you exactly what stage of psychological development you're at and what's important to you at this particular moment and what's coming up for you in the future. So that was the second step, was to really recognize that the stages of psychological development, if we fail to master one of these particular stages, it will result in mental health, mental disorder, and eventually physical disorder. And in the book, I show how physical disorders are linked to mental disorders, are linked to failures at particular stages of psychological development. We'll get into that a bit later. So those were the 2 main reasons why I wanted to write this book, to get the soul back into psychology and to explain and get people to understand that we grow in stages of psychological development.
And so regardless of where someone has come from or their path, their environmental, their culture, their exposure, their hardships or whatever, there is definitely a track psychologically that's equated to age?
There is a track that we all go through that is related to age. The first 3 stages are not optional. Everybody goes through them. They're the ego stages of development, 0 to 2, surviving stage, 3 to 7, the conforming stage, 8 to 24, the differentiating stage. And those 3 stages align with the dominance of 3 different mind brains. We've got 4 minds and 3 brains. I'll explain the 4th mind in a moment. But the first mind that's dominant, actually from 10 weeks after conception through to the 2nd year of life, the reptilian mind brain, the body mind, is dominant, and that's really focused on surviving. And then in the background, the limbic mind brain, the emotional brain, has been developing, and that is dominant from about 3 to 7. And then in the background again, the neocortex, the rational mind, has been growing and developing, and that becomes dominant. That becomes dominant around the age of 8 and continues to grow and develop until we're about 24. So during this whole period, each of these mind brains is growing and developing and learning from its experiences, learning beliefs about how to survive. That's the body mind. How to feel safe, that's the emotional mind. And how to feel secure in a larger world, that's the neocortex mind. And those beliefs that we learn during that period, based on our experiences, condition our belief system for the rest of our lives. And so if you have a difficult childhood, you're going to grow up with some limiting beliefs and difficult beliefs and fear-based beliefs, which you have then to undo or master at the individuating stage, which is like from 25 to 39. Now, here's the problem. Whilst we all go through the first 3 stages, the last 4 stages, the individuating stage, which is the bridge between the ego and the soul, and then the 3 stages of soul activation, not everybody, in fact, the majority of people on the planet never get that opportunity because they live in very difficult conditions, in poverty, so they're focused on survival, as Maslow would call it, on their basic needs or deficiency needs, and they're never able to focus on the higher order needs. Or they live in, and this applies to many, many people, they live in authoritarian regimes where if you focus on self-knowledge, if you focus on anything intellectual, you get locked up, basically. That was the case in the former USSR. They called them intellectuals, but basically these were people who were individuating and self-actualizing and, learning and having the freedom and autonomy to find out who they really are, and then fully expressing their soul self at the self-expression stage. So we don't all get to go through all 7 stages, but the key is this individuating stage, the 4th stage, where we learn to master or let go of our fears. And as we let go of the fears, we open ourselves up to the love energy of the soul and the activation of the soul. So those are the 7 stages. Well, I didn't mention, I mentioned individuating, self-actualizing in the 40s, integrating in the 50s, and serving in the 60s. And so in those 3 upper stages of soul activation are about self-expression in the 40s, finding out our sense of mission and purpose and becoming really fully who we are. And then in the 50s, we found meaning in the 40s, and we found our gifts and talents. Now we want to make a difference in the world in our 50s, but we can't do that unless we learn to connect. So connecting is fundamental in the 50s. And then now we're actually giving our gifts and we're connecting, and we want that to become a way of life. In our 60s, we just get into selfless service, caring for future generations and the community in which we live. And so there you have the 7 stages. You can accelerate the process a little bit, but having studied it for many years and there are very few individuals who are able to move through that more quickly than those age bands.
That's incredible. It's so very insightful. And do you have different processes in your book? Tell us about the overview of your book. Do we go through each of the phases, kind of explore, and does it, through reading it and delving into it, have a sense of awakening for us? It makes us more intentional, or do we feel a greater sense of normalcy about ourselves? Before the book and after the book, what are some of the things that you hold for the reader?
Oh, so there's so many insights, insights in the book, but let me give you a few of them. Okay. So, I talked about these stages, but we have to talk about the journey of the soul. Now, have you ever wondered where the will to survive comes from? It's in every living creature, and I have searched the scientific texts. I have never found an explanation of where the will to survive comes from. Oh, they say it's built into our DNA, but where does it come from? Well, you see, the will to survive is actually the soul's will to be present in three-dimensional material awareness. The soul lives in this fourth-dimensional energetic world, and the soul in that world has no needs because it creates its reality through its thoughts. We do that too in our three-dimensional material world, but we don't recognize that we're creating that reality. But anyhow, the soul has no needs, whereas the ego, which is, by the way, the ego is the creation of the soul. The soul creates the ego around our second birthday, round about there, because the soul has incarnated into the body, and it lives in this energy field of love, and the pain that the body experiences, the difficulty the body experiences, and then during that first 2 years of life, when we begin to recognize that we're not the center of the world, but there are other people out there, in other words, there is separation. So the pains experienced by the body mind are passed on to the subconscious, which is the soul mind, and the experience of separation is so painful to the soul that the soul creates the ego to act as a buffer. And so the ego is now protected by the ego, and the ego goes through these stages of development because the will to survive of the body is the soul's will to be present in material awareness, and so the ego picks up that, and the ego wants to survive, stay safe, and feel secure, and those are the first three stages of development. And so at each of these stages, at the beginning, during the embryo stage, there is only soul consciousness in the embryo. Around the 10th week of pregnancy, the reptilian mind-brain forms, and that is the body mind, and now the soul mind becomes the subconscious of the body mind. The body mind is keeping the body alive. After we're born, and around the second year, the limbic mind-brain becomes dominant. The body mind becomes the subconscious, and the soul mind becomes the unconscious. And then the neocortex clicks in as the dominant mind brain, the rational mind, around 7 or 8, continues growing and developing until we're about 24. So now the limbic mind brain, or the emotional mind, it becomes the subconscious of the rational mind. The body mind becomes the unconscious of the rational mind, and the soul mind now becomes the super unconscious. So the soul mind, the influence of the soul mind, gets pushed further and further and deeper out of our awareness. And so by the time we get to 24 or 25, the soul has disappeared, not disappeared, but it's there in the background, but it's not fully in our awareness. And so that was the first part of the journey. So the next part of the journey is bringing the soul back again. And that individuating stage between 25 and 39 is when we begin to align the motivations of the ego with the motivations of the soul. What that fundamentally means is letting go of any fears that we have, because fear energy cannot mix with love energy, because it's painful for the soul. So if we let go of our fear energy or master it, we allow the love energy of the soul to come forth at the self-actualizing stage, where we begin to find our true purpose and find meaning in life and so on. And that goes through right up to the serving stage. And if you manage to move through all of those stages, when you get to the serving stage, you're living the life of your soul. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. And for example, I'm now 71. I'm a very young 71, and I say at the beginning of this book, I couldn't have written it any earlier, because I wouldn't have experienced all of these stages of development. And now my soul speaks to me every day. It tells me what books to write. It gives me guidance. I only wish my soul wouldn't, it gives me guidance every day when I'm writing a book, but I wish it wouldn't do it at 4 o'clock in the morning, Because then I have to get up and I have to write. So when I'm working on a book, I'm up at 5 o'clock every morning, because I've got new downloads and new things to research in order to put into the book. Anyhow, those are some of the things that are important about the book. But I'm missing out probably the most important piece, which is the latter part of the book, where I link the stages of development to the chakra system, and I show how a failure to master a particular stage of development actually leads to physical disease. Let me give you a couple of examples. And it's full of facts and data, but for example, prostate cancer in males usually begins to occur in the late 50s and the 60s. Okay, the 50s is the stage of development where we've found our purpose. In the 40s and in the 50s, we need to connect with other people. However, men have a great difficulty doing that, because when they were going through the conforming stage, that's the second stage of ego development, they learn to hide their feelings and hide their emotions. And so when the men get to the 50s and they have to connect in the world, they have a huge handicap. And that handicap, the fear-based energy which was stored up in childhood, now comes forward and it manifests as prostate cancer. There's reasons why it's prostate cancer, but anyhow, that's all explained in the book. Now with women, it's different. Women don't. Women have an earlier issue, and that's in the self-actualizing stage in the 40s, because towards the middle of the 40s and into the 50s, that's the peak for breast cancer. And breast cancer is all linked to a failure of self-expression, because women are taught to be subservient, to serve their husband, to serve their families, and to put their needs on hold and to hold back and not to express who they are. Because the 40s, the first stage of soul activation is about self-expression. And when you hold back on that, it creates an energetic imbalance which shows up as breast cancer. And again, there's these stages of development are linked to particular diseases, which are linked to particular chakras, and I explain all of that in the book. So there's quite a lot in the second part of the book about all of the major causes of death and how they link to the different stages of development.
Wow. Well, we definitely want to get into that, along with so many other things. You are such a wealth of information, and I love the fact that you say it's not just that we have a soul, we are a soul. I want to know more about that too. When we come right back after this short break, we'll be back with Richard Barrett. Please delve into his website. He has blogs, he has speaking engagements all over the world, and know about the other books that he has written, including this one, richardbarrett.net. richardbarrett.net. Thank all of you for your ongoing support of Unity Online Radio. Because of you, we are in countries all over the world, and we are making a difference because all of us are willing to be different. And just that. We'll be right back after this short break.
Unity Online Radio brings you inspiring programs on a variety of spiritual topics. Giving to the network is now easier than ever. Simply text Unity Radio to 72727 from your smartphone. You can make a one-time or recurring donation. Your gifts help us offer enriching spiritual programs that reach listeners around the world. Text Unity Radio to 72727. Thank you for your support.
Have you asked your soul what it wants? Or are you so busy meeting the needs of everyone else? Family, friends, children, bosses, that you haven't checked in with the part of you that matters most? Janet Conner asked this question and received an answer. Your soul wants 5 things. That's it. 5 things. Your soul wants to connect with Source, commit to values, serve a purpose, express itself creatively, and last, it longs to create a beautiful, abundant life. Janet Conner teaches 5 wisdom habits that meet those needs. You can take each course separately or register for the complete Your Soul Wants 5 Things series and receive $1,000 in bonuses for free. Visit janetconner.com and explore all 5 courses in her signature series, Your Soul Wants 5 Things. Your soul will thank you.
Saying a good deed is its own reward? Well, moving toward a plant-based diet and vegan lifestyle is one kind and compassionate act that isn't just its own reward. It will also reward you with vibrant health, boundless energy, and easy way to keep your weight where you want it. And according to yogis and Unity's co-founder Charles Fillmore, even give a boost to your spiritual life. On Main Street Vegan, the radio program named for the popular book, Victoria Moran will make your move in a vegan direction easy, fun, affordable, and delicious. With enticing topics and entertaining guests every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time, only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Thank you for listening to The Intentional Spirit, Seeing and Being with Reverend Temple Hayes. If you have a question or comment about today's discussion, you can email us at theintentionalspirit@unityonlineradio.org. Now, here is your host, Reverend Temple Hayes.
And welcome back, everyone, and we're talking to the brilliant mind of Richard Barrett. Well, actually, we're talking to the person, Richard Barrett, who happens to have a brilliant mind. And he is giving us so many different insights today as we are delving into his incredible new book. Richard is the kind of person you want to be following, especially anybody that's a practitioner into health and well-being, anyone that's a spiritual leader, a communicator out in the field. He has so many various tools. His blogs are rich, his articles, tons of material also that you can use in some of your talking points. richardbarrett.net. All right, Richard, let's talk about this thing called death. One of my favorite subjects.
Oh,
wow.
Right. Yeah, good. Okay, well, just for the listeners, a couple of things. One, everybody knows how to spell Richard, but Barrett is B-A-R-R-E-T-T. And another thing, I use Facebook a lot, and so if you want to follow everything that I'm up to, you can sign up for my blogs and everything, but everything I do is also on Facebook as well, so send me a friend request. I'll love it. Okay, so let's talk about death. First of all, it's a three-dimensional material concept, okay? Because who we are, we're fourth-dimensional energetic beings experiencing life in a three-dimensional material body. But actually, this the three-dimensional material reality is not a property of the world, it's a property of our senses, because we have our five senses can only sense very, very thin sliver of all the frequencies of vibration. And because we can only tune into, like a radio, to a very few frequencies, like, we tune in and we get like 4 or 5 stations and that's it. Whereas a soul, we can tune in and get 500 stations, So, because we can only get these very limited frequencies, we think we live in this material world and we don't see all this other energetic stuff. So, first of all, you don't die. I mean, I've grown to understand it's a ridiculous concept, dying. It's a three-dimensional material concept. What happens is, your soul, which has kind of been in fourth-dimensional energetic awareness all the time, but has actually blocked that out in order to experience three-dimensional material awareness. When you die, the soul simply lets go of the three-dimensional material awareness to move back into fourth-dimensional energetic awareness. So what happens when you so-called die is you move back into that higher state of consciousness. And so death is not something to be feared. It is something, actually, it's a pretty amazing experience. And so that's one thing about death. In the book, I talk about my mother's death, and my mother lived to be 100. She basically did all her aging in the last year of her life. She got pneumonia, went into hospital, almost died, but came out, but never got out of bed again for the next 10 months. And I'd moved back from America to England to be close to her, and so I spent those last 15 months, actually, very, very close to her, living in her house when she was living in a home because she found it difficult getting up and down the stairs. But my mother died 15 days after her 100th birthday, and I got the call. Actually, let me just go back. I was asleep at home and in my mother's house, and it must have been early in the morning, around 6. I had this amazing dream of this female figure that just leapt on me and hugged me. It was unreal. I woke up later and I thought, my God, I've never had a dream like that before. Anyhow, so I got up, made breakfast, and within half an hour I had a call from the home saying my mum had died, just died. So clearly that female figure hugging me was my mum. And so I went in and, I saw her body, and, it was just a body. She wasn't there. And within an hour or two, this tremendous sense of joy descended upon me, because you have to know that my mother wanted to die. She didn't want to hang on. All her sisters had died very quickly, and she would be wanting to die for at least a year. And so I felt this joy. It stayed with me for the next 2 weeks, all the way through the funeral and everything. It was my mother's joy at being liberated again. And so, that was an amazing experience of death. But Temple, I'd like to talk about something else, which another aspect of death, and that's suicide, because many people commit suicide. Suicide rates increase phenomenally from the age of 15 onwards up to about late 40s, early 50s, and then begin to decline slightly. And everybody thinks, that's, people can't manage, etc., etc. But there are very, very specific reasons why people at the differentiating stage, that's 8 to 24, commit suicide, why people 25 to 39 commit suicide, and why people in their 40s commit suicide and people in their 50s commit suicide. There are very, very different reasons. And you have to understand that. And I've been working with some of the Veterans Administration in the USA to help them, because so many veterans, young veterans, older veterans, and Vietnam veterans commit suicide, and this insight, the fact that people commit suicide because they're not able to manage a particular stage of development, is a new idea. So the thing about the differentiating stage is that we're looking for respect and recognition in our peer group so that we can feel secure. And when we don't find that respect and recognition, then we get very fearful, and the will to survive lessens. And you see that with teenagers, who go on rampages and kill people in schools because they were all a loner. They never fitted into a group because they never got respect and recognition from their parents either. And so that's one of the main reasons people in that group, and it's particularly prevalent in Northern Ireland amongst young boys or men because of all the troubles in Northern Ireland. From 25 to 39, that's the individuating stage, and we're looking for freedom and autonomy to find out and explore who we are. And if you feel trapped, if you cannot do that, that's a different reason for committing suicide. And when I looked at the suicide statistics in the United Kingdom, I noticed that young women in Wales was the highest risk of suicide, women in their late 20s. Why? Because there's no employment for women in Wales. And so these young women were growing up and unable to leave home and unable to find freedom and autonomy, would go to the pub and drink to drown their sorrows, but eventually would commit suicide. Suicide in the late 40s and early 50s is all about self-expression. They feel trapped. People are unable to express who they really are so they can find meaning in your life. And if you're in those sort of circumstances, then that's the reason you commit suicide then. And so each stage of psychological development has its reasons for wanting to commit suicide if you fail to master that stage. That's a little bit about death. You asked me to talk about death. There's a few things about death that I revealed in the book. But the biggest thing really is that you don't die. You just shoot up into soul awareness.
And when we look at suicide, Richard, would we say that there's a lot more suicide today than there used to be?
Yes, it's increasing. Yeah, it's increasing in all age groups. You can go to Wikipedia and research that. Now, there's a tremendous amount of information now available about suicide and understanding suicide. But in this book, this is the only book I've seen where suicide is linked to failure at a particular stage of psychological development.
Yeah, with your studies and things that you've delved into and the work that you've done on soul, how do you sit with it? Is it an exercise that leads to a better space, or the individuals that in their lives of their own accord, are they going to start out from where they left? I mean, do you have... That's such a thing that people delve into, and I'm not saying you have the one and final answer. I'm just curious as to what you think about it.
So are you talking about
so when one takes their own life, it's not really is what we would understand to be the natural way of dying, right? I mean, there are people that are they're walking dead. It's like when people ask me how I feel about suicide and do I think it's horrible, I say, well, I was on the corner of suicide all the time. The way I used to be so drunk in a car, driving an automobile, and the things that I was hit by with transferred trucks and everything else. I mean, that was a form of, I don't want to be here. For some reason I'm still here. But do you know what I mean? It's not like natural that you get a disease or you have an accident or you die of an aged person. How do you sit with that? I was just curious to know.
So basically, the first 24 years of our lives, the 3 stages of ego development are preparing us to be able to live in this material reality so that the soul can manifest and create, from its 4th dimensional energetic perspective, create a wonderful life in this 3-dimensional material reality. Now, if we fail, I say fail because sometimes we fail to master our survival, safety, and security needs, not because of our failure, but we grew up in really difficult circumstances, and so it was really hard to get our needs met. And so anyhow, the point is, if at any one of these stages, these first 3 stages, or any stage, we feel blocked, trapped in not being able to meet our needs, it means that the soul will not be able to manifest the reality that it wants to create in this particular incarnation, and therefore the will to survive decreases. So that's why I call the book, the byline is about ego-soul dynamics, because suicide is a particular ego-soul dynamic where the ego gives up, if you like, because of its failings and the fact that it feels trapped. It cannot be of service to the soul, and so decides to interrupt the incarnation. Now, that's all subconscious, but basically that's really what it's about. The ego gives up, and very often because of its fear-based beliefs, then it feels really stuck. And we can all reach out to people who feel suicidal and help them to see that it is their fear-based beliefs that are trapping them, and that if they could face their fears and move through it, then they perhaps have a wonderful life. So it's all just part of this ego-soul dynamic, the way I see it, and let's not forget that the ego is actually the creation of the soul. The purpose of the ego is really to protect the soul from this negative energy, and secondly to prepare the vehicle and living in 3-dimensional materiality so that the soul can actually self-express, connect, and contribute. Because that's really why the soul incarnates, to self-express, connect, and contribute. And that's the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. And everything you do in the first 3 stages of development can either hinder or help the soul in that journey. So at the survival level, if you are able, that's 0 to 2, if you're cared for and your needs are met and you feel comfortable about getting your needs met and you had a good experience, then that first stage of ego development, the first stage of soul activation, will be easy for you. That's a self-expression. So the surviving is linked to self-expression. And at the second stage, that's the limbic mind-brain dominant stage, 3 to 8, when we're learning how to be loved and accepted, and build relationships. If we fail at that stage, when we get to our 50s, we'll have real difficulty doing that in our 50s. So the second stage of ego development is linked to the second stage of soul activation. And then the third stage of ego development, the differentiating, being respected and recognized for who you are and feeling secure in your environment, in your peer group. If you don't have that confidence, if you never got that confidence as a teenager and young adult, when you get to your 60s, you will not be able to make a contribution to society because you won't be able to feel confident about giving your gift. And so you see the first three stages of development are intimately linked, of ego development, are intimately linked to the three stages of soul development. And that is vitally important to understand, because what happens to you in the first 24 years of your life fundamentally affects the well-being for the rest of your life.
That's amazing. Well, as you can see, as I told you from the beginning of the show, this is really, it's a great opportunity to delve into the wisdom of Richard Barrett. Please go to his website, richardbarrett.net. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Let's please keep you on ever so often, because it's such a gift, Richard. I really love everything that you're bringing and the various ways in which you are helping humanity. Thanks for your bravery and your courage. Everyone, thank you so much for being on the show, for listening, for participating, and for sharing about what we do. If you'd like to know more, visit us at firstunity.org or templehays.com. It's been a pleasure having you all with us today. God bless you on this incredible journey that we call life.
Thank you for tuning into The Intentional Spirit, Seeing and Being with Reverend Temple Hayes. Join us every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central for tools and simple applications which will support you from being alive to fully living. This program is brought to you in part by First Unity at Unity Campus in St. Petersburg, Florida. To learn more about this ministry, go to www.unitycampus.org or www.templehays.org.
If I were brave, I'd walk the razor's edge, where fools and dreamers dare to tread, and never lose faith.
How is life working for you? Would it be okay with you if life got easier, simpler, yet more meaningful and vibrant? Join certified life coach Carla McClellan Tuesday afternoons for Vibrant Living. Each week, Coach Carla and her guests will share strategies and solutions designed to make your life more vibrant. Is there something in your life you'd like help with? A dream you'd like to achieve? A relationship you'd like to improve? Call into the show toll-free for Coaching with Carla. That's Vibrant Living, Life Coaching with Carla. Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Central on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
What if we're all meant to do what we secretly dream?
Sometimes life can seem like a jigsaw puzzle. Even if we think we have a clear picture of what we want, we may become overwhelmed in our efforts to fit all the pieces together. Although each of our lives may look different on the outside, what we are all striving to create is the same: peace of mind. We mistakenly think that peace will be ours once we have fit all the pieces of our lives into place. But peace isn't dependent on outer circumstances, and it's not something that must be finished. It's a work in progress within each of us. If I want to picture peace clearly, I look within myself. The peace I've been missing is there. Peace can begin with me.
To find a Unity Church near you, please visit our website at www.unity.org.
God is formless, yet takes many forms. What goes around comes around. Chant the name of the Lord and be free. No one comes to the Father except through me. Ever been confused by the variety and apparent contradiction within world religions? Join Reverend Paul John Roach every Tuesday for insight into those principles held in common by all the great religious traditions in world spirituality, exploring the unity within all cultures and faith traditions. Using discussions, interviews, humor, insight, and practical advice, we will clarify the confusion and reveal simple yet profound truths. Call in with your questions and ideas and help break down the barriers that separate us from one another. That's World Spirituality with Paul John Roach, Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, here on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.
Are you ready to live in joy? Is there an area of your life where you could use a miracle? Have you been praying for help and guidance? Come join Lisa and Bill and their guests for an hour filled with practical tips on experiencing miracles, greater abundance, focus, deliberate living, and the peace of God that passeth all understanding. Experience more joy in life. Listen to Living in Joy, Reflections on A Course in Miracles with Lisa Natoli and Bill Free every Friday at 2 p.m. Central here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world. Are you ready to live in joy? Is there an area of your life where you could use a miracle? Have you been praying for help and guidance? Come join Lisa and Bill and their guests for an hour filled with practical tips on experiencing miracles, greater abundance, focus, deliberate living, and the peace of God that passeth all understanding. Experience more joy in life. Listen to Living in Joy, Reflections on A Course in Miracles with Lisa Natoli and Bill Free every Friday at 2 p.m. Central here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Does music open your heart and bring you peace and joy? Experience the sacredness of sound with Ramdesh Kaur as we travel the world of mantra, Kundalini yoga, and devotional music. Join us for a journey into spirit, Thursdays at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern on Spirit Voyage Radio with Ramdesh. Only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Somewhere, tucked away in the Unity Library archives in Unity Village, Missouri, you can find a secret treasure. They are the scripts from Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore's early days on broadcast radio. The teachings of Unity's founders, almost 100 years old. Now, for the first time in history, you can hear them through the power of the Internet. Join Bob Brock every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, for Unity Classic Radio, Words from Our Past. Discover the wisdom of Charles Fillmore's talks and of other Unity radio speakers read on the air again. Call in your comments and questions as Bob and his special guests revisit Unity radio talks of the past, along with historical background from the early days of the Unity movement. That's Unity Classic Radio, Words from Our Past, every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, right here on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.
God is formless, yet takes many forms. What goes around comes around. Chant the name of the Lord and be free. No one comes to the Father except through me. Ever been confused by the variety and apparent contradiction within world religions? Join Reverend Paul John Roach every Tuesday for insight into those principles held in common by all the great religious traditions in world spirituality, exploring the unity within all cultures and faith traditions. Using discussions, interviews, humor, insight, and practical advice, we will clarify the confusion and reveal simple yet profound truths. Call in with your questions and ideas and help break down the barriers that separate us from one another. That's World Spirituality with Paul John Roach, Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, here on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.
Are you ready to live in joy? Is there an area of your life where you could use a miracle? Have you been praying for help and guidance? Come join Lisa and Bill and their guests for an hour filled with practical tips on experiencing miracles, greater abundance, focused, deliberate living, and the peace of God that passeth all understanding. Experience more joy in life. Listen to Living in Joy, Reflections on A Course in Miracles with Lisa Natoli and Bill Free every Friday at 2 p.m. Central here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
There is peace. There is quiet.
Reverend Paulette's mantra is, "It's all a prayer." Tune in every Tuesday as Unity Minister Paulette Pipe leads you in meditation and prayer on touching the stillness. Make no mistake, this is not nap time. With an energy that will captivate you, touching the stillness will guide you in deep meditation, leaving you enlivened. Hear astounding meditations and learn more about different forms of meditation. Enrich your prayer life as Reverend Paulette, Senior Minister of Touching the Stillness Ministries, affirmatively prays with power and authority by taking live prayer requests from callers like you. Whether you have a prayer request for yourself or for a loved one or are ready for a deepened meditation experience, make sure you tune in on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Central Time, where we'll be joining in consciousness with the unceasing prayer activity of the Silent Unity 24/7 prayer ministry at Unity Village. That's Touching the Stillness with Reverend Paulette Pipe every Tuesday right here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Letting go in the stillness. I'll light a candle in your name.
Just like life, grief is a journey, not a destination. Whether it is loss of life, relationship, security, or simply the process of change, have you given yourself permission to begin your journey of grief? Have you yielded to the gift of grace? Join Reverend Chaz Wesley every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central on a virtual navigation from grief to grace and explore new horizons of empowerment, significance, and support. Only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
I'll light a candle in your name.
Somewhere, tucked away in the Unity Library archives in Unity Village, Missouri, you can find a secret treasure. They are the scripts from Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore's early days on broadcast radio. The teachings of Unity's founders, almost 100 years old. Now, for the first time in history, you can hear them through the power of the Internet.
Join Bob Brock every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, for Unity Classic Radio, Words from Our Past. Discover the wisdom of Charles Fillmore's talks and of other Unity Radio speakers read on the air again. Call in your comments and questions as Bob and his special guests revisit Unity Radio talks of the past, along with historical background from the early days of the Unity movement. That's Unity Classic Radio, Words from Our Past, every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, right here on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.